Moving swiftly on to our next segment of the program, we have our second plenary of today, Empowering Innovation, Strengthening Thailand's Climate Tech Ecosystem. Moderating this discussion is Megan C., Director of Partnerships at EcoBusiness, and joining her on stage are our distinguished guests. Could I please invite Mr. Peter Dupont, co-founder and co-CEO of Asia Clean Energy Partners, Warapot Kingkau Kantong, Head of Investment at Beacon Venture Capital, and last but not least, Thirapat Horsinchai, Thailand Country Manager of New Energy Nexus. And I'll pass the time over to you, Megan. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shireen, and thank you everyone as well for being here. I know that it's getting a little bit chilly in this room, so if you want to just stand up and take a bit of a stretch, please go ahead and do so. But thank you also to my speakers for being here today. I'm going to set the context for this plenary session in just a little bit, but maybe we'll flash up the QR code first. As in all EB Eco-Business Plenary tradition, we know we always like to engage the audience as well. So the word cloud is going to be up there just about now. What sector requires climate technology and innovation the most to decarbonize? We just came off an hour of very, very insightful, colorful discussion from earlier. So please feel free to take your comments into this space as well. So while you all are doing that, if I don't see your phones up, that means I know you're not participating. So please do. Let me just set the context to this plenary session. So climate tech, it's increasingly recognized as pivotal in addressing the escalating climate crisis. Global emissions, as you know, are on an upward trajectory, with the latest UNFCCC report from COP29 highlighting that the current commitments fall very short of limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. And so not surprisingly, the report finds that it remains technically possible to actually get on a 1.5 degree pathway, but countries need to promise and deliver unprecedented cuts to emissions by 2030. And for the world to get on a least cost pathway for 1.5 degrees Celsius, emissions must fall 42% by 2030 compared to 2019 levels. And for 2 degrees Celsius, the decrease of 28% by 2030 is needed. So against this a little bit gloomy backdrop, climate technology then represents both an urgent necessity and also a huge opportunity to decarbonize industries and build resilience. A good spark here is that the sector is seeing growing interest from investors, with the share of climate tech deals as a proportion for all of venture funding expanding from 3.2% in 2019 to about 9.5% in 2023, and there's a big increase. Asia is a key part of this whole net zero solution, with 50% of the renewable energy power and fuel supply and about 30% of NBS, meaning nature-based solutions, potential being in this region as well. Yet, a glaring gap still really exists between innovative ideas and commercial scale implementation. Challenges that we'll highlight later on by the speakers all exist, some of the hurdles that investors face as they look to deploy capital into these very promising enterprises as well. So with that, I'm going to go back to the word cloud. What sector requires climate technology and innovation the most to decarbonize? Energy, huge one. I think we all know that's a big one there. Oil and gas, yes, related to energy as well. Green buildings, agriculture, data centers, transport, all really, really good, buzzwords that we're going to take into discussion as well. So with that, I'm going to go on to the speakers to maybe comment on this, but also to share with you, or rather to share with us, despite the crucial role in transitioning to a low carbon future, there still remains a big gulf between commercialization and technological ideas as well. From your various experiences, we've got lots of, good, very experience here. We've got the consultant, we've got the venture, and we also got the ecosystem builder as well. Please do share your insights with us on this. I'm going to go from Peter first.
Thank you, Megan. Pleasure to be here. So, I guess I think the topic in the last panel was really focused on, towards the end especially, on how to get resources to SMEs, how to aggregate, and I'll answer the question by talking about a network that I've been working with for about 15 years called Private Financing Advisory Network, and it is funded by donors. It's called PFAN, Private Financing Advisory Network. So what the network does is a network of 250 advisors and coaches around the world. And I oversee the PFAN network in Southeast Asia. We have like 26 coaches. We coach about 25 companies a year. And what we do is we go out to the forest, we find trees with fruit. We select the best fruit, we polish the fruit, and the fruit is companies that are looking for money, and we hand the fruit to investors on a silver platter. So if we do that, and we've been quite successful over the past 15 years, we've coached 1,200 projects, companies, 250 of them have got financing for $3.3 billion. Now, we've heard from the previous speakers that the need is much greater than that. And so the question we have, and I think things like de-risking, like Sarani was talking about, are important, but the reason that technologies don't get commercialized is the entrepreneurs have to have the skills and the ability to make their fruit look good, and then to talk finance, so that the finance, and then once that happens, the bigger issue really is scaling up, because it doesn't help if you have one project, say, biodiesel from some sort of agricultural waste, right? It doesn't, if you do one unit and you do another unit, that's not what we need. We need, thousands of units across. So scaling up is really a big problem.
Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I would like to echo the amount of innovation that is in the market as well, that I think Thailand is lacking. We asked ourselves a little bit why that happened, and one of the hypotheses that we have goes back to how innovation are being approached in Thailand. Right, a lot of innovation is happening in university and in research lab, and from the beginning, this innovation, that KPIs, that success is measured on, whether that research, that innovation is pushing the boundaries of knowledge creation or not, and how many publications, how many citations that researchers are getting cited on, and not necessarily whether the innovation that's happening in research lab gets commercialized. So with that end goal in mind, it makes sense why a lot of innovation never made it to commercialization stage, or the resources that are required for that, those innovations to hit the market are never put. A lot of times when we talk to researchers wanting to commercialize a project, we often realize that within the team, they are all researchers, and not a single one person knows about finance, knows about marketing, knows about how to do business development. So realizing this problem, and we know that there are a lot of innovations that now wants to commercialize, we create this network called the Climate Tech Hub, together with Nexus Energy as well, with other like-minded organizations, that we bring together people who want to do better for the innovation and exchange ideas, right? Another program that we also launched is called the Catalyst program. Within our company, we teach startups or research project on how to do on how to run like a startup, essentially. So that is one of the areas that I strongly think that is the missing piece why innovation never made it to commercialization in Thailand.
Thank you so much, Robert. And Jerapat, you guys, your insights on this.
Well, thank you so much, Megan. Happy to be here. Just to echo Kun report as well. Regarding this factor, right? As an ecosystem builder, I see a lot of challenges, I would say. So finance is definitely a big thing. If you look at not only the climate finance overall, but in climate finance, especially for startups. Thai startup, according to our data, as well as with the TechSource directory, there's only like 6% of the startups that are actually climate related. So that's actually really low. In comparison to that, only that 6% out of that, like 6%, right? You see the number of like deals that actually that scores in terms of like the investment deal that they scores. This year, you can see that the graph actually like dropped drastically from COVID period, where you have around 30 deals a year to now only 10 deals a year, which is a drastic drop as well. So finance is definitely one. The second question is, okay, finance is one where, okay, you see there's less pipeline of startup here and less potential of the startups to scale, right? On the second part, where are all these like climate tech startups, because they only consist of 6%. So Kun Prapor already touched on this, that they came out of the lab, but essentially the question would be like, why do they only come out of the lab, right, and not somewhere else as well? Like SMEs can also be climate related. So what we found was that not only they came out of so on the lab part, they came out, but not a lot as well, because of the need for finance, as well as like need of expertise, as well as partnerships. But what they need is really market validations, right? Knowing the demand and what to develop, as well as like having the scaling partner to get that out of the lab. So what we found was that when we talk about these two problems, it's actually linked to the third problem, which is demand validations. Where do you find all this demand for like climate, mitigation and adaptations in the corporates? The corporate seems to need it, but where the corporates also seem to have the same problem of matching this with the supply, right? So it's kind of like going back to all the previous conversation when we were saying that we might need an aggregators that match all these demand and supplies, and then there's match of needs of financing and the match of like demand validations to propel the market forward, right? So when going back to your question initially of what sector that need to decarbonize, so I was thinking that energy is definitely a huge thing, transport, and I'm really happy to see green building up there as well, because I think it's one of the topic in which we don't really discuss here in Thailand. But energy, especially in buildings, Bangkok consume 30% of the electricity nationwide, and we're actually polluting more with like these areas, and there's no startups or no government policies that are actually promoting the transitioning of like green buildings as well. So we, as Nexus, we are launching a program on green building as well to help building owners as well as data centers decarbonize. So I think this is a growing topic as we go on to the next age of like AIs and that we will discuss further. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Jura. But you kind of also said all the points that we'll be talking about a little bit later on as well. But Peter, do you want to further elaborate on any of that?
Yeah, I was actually thinking of something that Sarani was saying about the fact that, and was discussed by others on the previous panel, about the fact that there's sort of an oligopoly of power production, and the take-or-pay contracts that lead to Thailand now having about 60% of its electric power generated by gas. And even in the 2037, the Alternative Energy Development Plan, woohoo, we make great progress. It's only 40%. How on earth can, we're almost at 2040 and we're saying that's progress to have 40% natural gas, to the point about the LNG terminal, right? And so I have I'm going to get real granular here. So there's two companies that we've been supporting through PFAN recently, two Thai companies, and they're really great companies. I'll mention their names. One is called Efinity, and they have a peer-to-peer trading system, which is sort of validated through the sandbox that the Energy Regulatory Commission sets up in Thailand. And the other is a company called Aquaris that has a turbine that actually regulates pressure in for water utilities. So when you're moving water around in an industrial estate or moving water around to supply it, you can actually save a lot of energy, because usually they just turn a valve and you just lose all that energy. So these turbines collect the energy. Okay. Neither of these solutions are supported by policy. So for example, peer-to-peer trading is not allowed. But so where do they do it? They do it behind the meter. They do it in captive power in an industrial estate. They can do it in a Muban, or one of these gated communities that have its own, say a few hundred houses, right? And then basically what this does is, if you have a solar panel, you're a seller. If you have a house and you have a refrigerator, you're a buyer, and you can be both, right? But that solution can't be scaled up. So it has to be done outside of it. So to me, the fact that innovative companies have to try to escape or avoid the regulated space, that sucks. Sorry, I could use a stronger word, but it's unfortunate. I used a weaker word there. It really is not, right? So why can't we get the policy? And I agree with Sarani completely. We need a wholesale energy reform. Otherwise, we're going to be paying, in 2040, what is the price of natural gas going to be? It's going to be electricity produced by natural gas. It's going to be like, 3.5, 4 baht. What's the price of solar generated electricity going to be? It's going to be, the marginal cost will be zero. So we're going to be paying 3.5, 4 baht for something that we should be able to buy for like half a baht, right? Right now, you can buy it for 1.6 baht. It's crazy.
No, thank you, Peter, for raising that point. I think that also goes back to policy, right? Is that needed in this age, or are we looking at more deregulation? Making market kind of work their magic around. That was also something that came up in the previous forums, which I'll mention later on. But I wanted to pick on the point on finance, right? Because we're talking about how global climate finance has seen a huge growth in past recent years. But I think it was also mentioned by the opening plenary as well. Funding is now directed towards more large-scale infrastructure projects rather than the smaller, innovation-driven climate tech solutions that are actually very critical for systemic transformation. So even with this increased finance interest in the climate tech space, there's this critical challenge of ensuring that substantial capital is also allocated to effectively support the scaling of climate tech from concept to market-ready solutions. So how do we address this, macro-level funding to on-the-ground solutions where we can address that gap between ideation and commercialization? It kind of relates to the first question as well, but a little bit more granular. I'm going to go with Warafat first.
Right, thank you. So while we are appreciative that this kind of capital exists, I think there's a lot of work to be done. And the models that we have seen quite interesting and somewhat successful in other market already is that we have this large international finance pool getting deployed in smaller countries through sort of a representative or local partners who know the ecosystem well. Now how would that look like for innovation in Thailand? The capital deploy partner could be, number one, accelerators who are ecosystem builders who, knows who people are in the market, know where the innovations are happening, know what kind of resource are needed to pull and build that ecosystem from ground up. Because that's one part that we are lacking tremendously. Number two, we can work with local investors who knows again who or what kind of pain points is in the market and what kind of business model would fly. And number three, they can work with local government agencies like NIA or DEPA who already have some sort of supportive program for this kind of startup, but at some capacity there might be some funding budget challenges. So deploying through these three local entity or agencies, I think would be the best way to approach bringing big budget to local innovations.
Thank you so much, Robert. Jared, I see you thinking quite hard over there.
Yeah, I think when we ask about financing, right, we have to ask ourselves back, what do we need the financing for, right? It's actually for scaling and matching that with the demand, right? So essentially, coming back, if the policy is the one that's been blocking the demand side, right? And all these startups have to find other ways to find, the loopholes to commercialize. Are there any additional ways in which they can not only validate the demand can find them, they get the finance, as well as scaling that onwards, right? Is there a mechanism for that? I think that partially, I think we have to start with initially when we talked about the policies, we came back always to the policy side, right? But what if we cannot fix the policy side? Is there a way that you can intuitively validate the demands? So interestingly enough, there might be some ways. Working at Nexus, I saw a couple of startups in China. So what they do is they use the Web3 peer-to-peer trading space to instigate kind of like a peer-to-peer trading of their own using their own platform through blockchain. For example, to circumvent all the regulations, then they can scale that globally. So I think there's more innovative approach that startup are trying ways to do it. But definitely, yeah, if there's a mechanism in which peer-to-peers, demand validators can happen in Thailand, that would that would also leveraging all these like blockchain technology and decentralized technology to aid. That would be one. The second though is we can go the traditional ways, as Raport said, which we build the ecosystem from the key stakeholders. We create visibilities over all the stakeholders that are involved, from both the demand side, from the corporates and the startup side on the one hand, so that everyone has a visibility. But I think the most important part that we are lacking here, I think, is the expertise in terms of the financial expertise in evaluating different alternatives in terms of the technology. When we say solar, we know it directly that it's the cheapest one, right? The cheapest alternative. But when you say, for example, we now have geothermal startups that can tap into any energy source, even at the bottom of this hotel, can turn into a power plant, right? Like, how do you validate that on a massive scale that allows all these to be, this kind of like lab ideas to scale? So I think it's a combination of the two approach. I wouldn't want us to, always stick about the regulations, right? But I think there are ways in which we can navigate from both top down and bottom up, I would say, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a good point to bring up. I think what we're seeing now is more the bottom-up approach that is probably going to help to scale climate tech to bigger heights. I want to touch on a point of externalities. There's a lot of that going on right now. The big white elephant in the room, U.S. election outcome, with Donald Trump coming in, we don't know what the US is going to do next. Well, rather, we kind of know, but we really don't want to think about it right now. With them scaling back on climate commitments and pulling out the Paris Agreement. And then we had the recent COP29, which went over time to secure this climate finance deal, which is way short of what developing countries actually need. So with that, there is still a huge growing, gap in adaptation of finance, and that gap for also developing countries to build their resilience building measures as well. So with all these various externalities going on, then I guess how do we access financing that's available despite all the externalities going on? And at the same time, how are solutions being delivered despite these externalities? Two parts of that question. I'll let you unravel that a little bit, but Peter, I think you have a response to that.
Okay, as a U.S. citizen, whose job up until after Trump was elected the first time was a senior climate change advisor for USAID in the region, I can say we have good news and bad news. The bad news is that the next 4 years are going to be a bit of a disaster in terms of climate policy and climate support from the U.S. government. I don't have a whole lot of hope that on the climate side that there's going to be a lot of good news from the U.S., certainly in terms of international cooperation. I think one thing that's going to happen politically in the United States is they're going to try to repeal the IRA, which is funding a lot of climate tech and a lot of sort of onshoring of batteries and different renewable energy technologies in the U.S., and really generating quite good economic returns. But I think, in fact, what's going to happen is that they're going to find out, because 70% of the districts in the U.S. where those incentives are going under the IRA for climate technology are red districts where there are Republicans. So I think once they try to, so that won't work out the way they're planning, I think. There'll be certainly weakened international commitments. There's going to be a push to deregulate, which will have certain impacts. But, if we say, how is that going to affect us here and now? I don't think it's going to have a big effect in Thailand or Southeast Asia. That, it's not that the policy stuff and the climate stuff doesn't matter, but there's enough support among business to invest in these clean technologies, these low carbon technologies, and there's enough of a business case, and there's a ton of capital. I just was looking at some numbers for Thailand. So Thailand's 2023, the foreign direct investment was $24 billion. And what are the top three sectors? Electric vehicles, smart electronics, BCG, and of course, smart mobility. Green bonds, which was talked about in the previous panel a little bit, reached a total of 400 billion baht in 2022, which is about $12 billion. So there's tons of capital. And my sort of short answer to your question is just we really need good pipeline, right? And so how do you build the pipeline? And how do you aggregate the pipeline?
Robert, do you want to go for that?
Yeah, I think similar to what you said, I think the private sector, at least in Thailand, is pretty strong. Even when Thailand hasn't, made commitments to, net zero, we are seeing Thai corporate came out and, making their own version of commitment. So the demand, initial demand is there. But when we talk about, financing within the startup industries or after, post the, the election, if we think about clean energy adoption or innovation adoption, we can think about carrot and stick, right, for decarbonization. For carrot, we are seeing a lot of technology that has reached what we call green advantage, or there's economic incentive for being green, and that could be solar energy, some EVs. So we think there would be increasing financing within those sector and its infrastructure and ecosystem. But for the startup that is in the areas that the green advantage is not so apparent yet, with the absence of hard deadlines or goal, we might expect some delays in adoption trickle down from other countries to Thailand. So our goal is not to avoid investing in them, but how do we support them to reach price parity? How do we support them to reach economy of scale that they are one day price competitive to brown option and be ready for corporates to adopt.
Thank you so much, Robert. I wanted to turn to the topic of AI. I think, Jared, you did talk about that earlier. And how Web3 and blockchain is actually disrupting this space as well. I think AI, as everyone would know, it's seen as a bit of a disruption, but also a huge opportunity as well. Globally, investments in AI is projected to reach about 200 billion by 2025, and this is a huge number. This is all driven by applications such as generative AI, model training, infrastructure development. But also, I guess on the flip side, these massive investment flows also have the potential to overshadow investments in other innovation sectors, including climate tech. But then we also know in climate tech, AI does also provide very transformative opportunities for advancing climate solutions. For example, AI is already being used to optimize renewable energy grids, predict climate patterns, risks, enhanced carbon tracking systems. So Jirapat, I guess in your field, you do see a lot of these climate tech come your way. How do you see AI shaping and influencing the climate tech startup sector in Thailand, and what sort of opportunities is it helping to unlock in this space?
Well, thank you so much. I would say that on a maybe I can paint a picture on the overview first. I think on the AI sector, definitely like the energy usage that we have been using through AI is actually increasing rapidly. So now it's projected to be accounted to around like 2%, including AI plus crypto. Actually, interestingly enough, crypto also polluting a lot with the mining, to around 2% by 2027. But actually, you see all these like AI use and coinciding with the growth of all these data centers, right? Especially in Thailand, you heard news like, oh, Google is now here, Amazon is now here. Now everyone is like here setting up the data centers, right? But these applications is very consumer centric. We see AI growing from like ChatGPT, Claude, or those generative AI, right? But I think in the next phase would be B2B, kind of like AI is optimizing all the workflow in the business, and it's when it's actually got adopted. But this is on the demand side, right? But when you say, can AI be actually like helping us decarbonize, in all the sector? Can it help with the growth of like the energy sector during demand forecast with great optimization, predictive maintenance, for example? All those can be done. But I think what is really interesting, that is a trend, I think, that we haven't seen yet in Thailand, but is happening, is that how do you combine infrastructure of like the energy that's right now really centralized to turn that into a more decentralized grid that is powered by AI and is optimized by AI. You don't need a central control, for instance, and people are incentivized to do that. For example, I think those are that's this one startup that I found called Arc Green from Shanghai. What they want to create is a Web3 kind of like trading for energy, where anyone that already has solar on their grid will have kind of like a small device, IoT device, plugged into the inverter, and they can trade peer-to-peer with their peers, as well as having those electricity kind of like IREX certificate when they sell it, as well as verifying the carbon credits that's been generated from those renewable use as well. So I think this peer-to-peer kind of like model is now interestingly growing, and they're trying to replicate this globally as well. So on this side is about AI in decarbonization use cases using blockchain, but on the other side you have AI that is embedded in decarbonizing the business sector, as you see, using AI to predict the load, predict the carbon emission in your supply chain and all that, etc. I think those are the traditional one, which we are now seeing that's growing as well. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Jirapat. I wonder, Peter, do you have any kind of views on how AI is being used in delivering these energy solutions, especially in the tech and innovation space?
Yeah, some of the ones that Jirapat just mentioned. So, for example, just better sort of collection and management of data on grids, for example. But I wanted to sort of mention first something about so at the macro level, AI, all this investment, the gold rush for AI that you were talking about, that we're reading about every day, and we, all of our Chat GPT or Claude or Copilot clicks, that uses a lot of energy. But interestingly, what's happening is that the data centers are getting much, much more efficient, so it's much less than they thought it would be. Still, the amount of investment in the third quarter globally for AI was about $20 billion. It was twice as much as the amount of investment in climate tech. And climate tech's, the investment in climate tech next year is supposed to go down by 50%, and that's really depressing. This is in a Bloomberg article that you mentioned, which is worth reading. But I'm actually, if you ask, I'm an optimist or a pessimist on this. I'm actually quite optimistic because there's just so many operational areas where AI can really make a difference in terms of optimizing efficiency. So just a few areas. So first of all, energy efficiency. We can do much more than we used to be able to through smart grids, building efficiency, industrial optimization, and this whole concept of Internet of Things or IoT. For renewable energy deployment, forecasting of solar and wind, which is really important for managing grid reliability, maintenance and operation of the grid. Not to mention what you were talking about is just like outside of the box solutions like sort of the subversive changing electrons with your neighbor because you have this app that some cool Chinese company set up, and hopefully won't get arrested by MEA or PEA if you do that. And then, just in the area of materials, in fusion, hydrogen technologies, carbon capture, innovations in the sort of market forecasting. So there's just a ton of areas. So I think a lot of the projections. So first of all, I think two things are going to happen. One, we're going to have a lot more demand than we think we will now, in part because we have to electrify everything. To decarbonize, most of the transport devices we use have to be electrified. And the second thing is, so there'll be a lot more demand, but I think we'll be able to manage the carbon footprint by having like highly decarbonized electricity, because that's where the price trends are going, and these solutions are really going to help. So, for example, and I'll just sort of say one thing our company is doing to reduce our carbon footprint. We are moving from WeWork on Tonglaw, near Tonglaw. And we like WeWork because they have free beer from 5 to 7. But we are moving to the most energy efficient building in Thailand, which is on Soi 39. Do you know what the name of that building is? No, because you live in Singapore. It's called Coral Life. Some people here know about that. And so we're doing that. That building uses 70% less electricity than the typical Bangkok office building. It looks the same. It did not cost a huge amount. Probably the payback on the investment was about 3-4 years.
That's amazing. I'll definitely make time to
Well,
visit
I'll
the next
invite you
time
to
I'm
our
here.
office. We're moving on December 6th, so anytime after that.
I'll come back here again. Thank you for that, Peter. I wanted to talk to to Rarafat really from the VC perspective. How do you see companies incorporating AI then as part of their business models? And do you kind of put an extra point because they are? We'd like to know more about the evaluation process behind that.
We are seeing a lot of AI, traditional startup turned AI companies over the past years, just because being as internet software now, it's not sexy anymore. They need an AI element to boost valuation. We're seeing a lot of climate companies, climate startup with an AI spin as well, because unfortunately, being green cannot demand valuation premium so much. But being AI can, that's just a sad sad state of the world. But we do look at a lot of AI companies, and we think AI has strong potential to decarbonize. We invested in a few AI related climate companies, helping tackle the scope 3 emission issues. Because within the supply chain, right, as we mentioned, for banks, for example, scope 3 is almost everything that the bank is emitting. Getting information from one client is just not efficient. Before that, you use Excel and you send Excel out, and you aggregate, right? But with AI model, there's that power of aggregation and power that you can get real-time data with just as little information as possible. So we are seeing that more and more within the startup industry. But the question comes to whether using AI is necessary or not, or you just put it there to demand valuation. We go back and see, what's the intention that the company is trying to solve, and whether AI is the core of that. If the AI is the core of that, then we are more okay, because we know that AI is very expensive. And if the value proposition of the company is not tied to AI, and AI is just there for SaaS, then we know that the company would run into profitability issue in the longer run, which we would like to see, ability for them to survive and not just, get high valuation.
Oh, that's a very good point. Sure, but you wanted to comment on that.
Yeah, I actually wanted to comment on that actually, because we see, right, in Thailand, there's a lot of funding into SaaS-based company, especially SaaS-based AI company. But what happened to hard tech AI company that's here, right? That we don't really see this deal flow coming out of Thailand at all. And I would say that it's quite we need more of these solutions, right? Energy efficiency solutions that Peter was talking about, that we really need it in Thailand, and there's a huge demand for it. But where is it, right? I can only see, like, out of this ecosystem, I can only see 2 to 3 that are popping up. And I think one side of that is maybe is about running the business model with the VCs, different VCs, both Thai VCs and international VCs as well, that's willing to invest, because Thailand is a hot country in a way. Most of our energy is used for cooling, right? We don't really talk about it, but actually, if a startup that combine this energy optimization and can scale, could be something that worth looking into here. And hope you fund more of these as well.
Energy efficiency is something that we look at as well. One of the area that we are trying to think about more is how do we bring about energy efficiency solution to already existing buildings or infrastructures, because we have a lot of that. A lot of companies that we have met are trying to, tackle it from ground up, meaning new installation, which comes with a lot of capex, with which we don't have that luxury. So that's something we are trying to figure out as well.
Yes.
No, thank you both. I'm going to open the floor to questions right after I make this little bit of a plug, actually. I know you're talking about, hard tech AI solutions. Actually, New Energy Nexus and Beacon Venture Capital are partners with us on our innovation challenge that we have called the Livability Challenge, and that's something that we do with Temasek Foundation. We're in the 8th edition right now, and this is also kind of a call to partners and also solutions to come apply for this innovation challenge that we have. Every year, Temasek Foundation, as we come together, we talk about, okay, what kind of tracks of solutions do we need most in this part of the world? And this year, we've chosen decarbonization, and a cooler earth actually. So technologies that will help to cool, mitigate, adapt. All that we're looking for. So again, call out to partners and solutions to apply. We're currently in the applications phase. It closes in February, and then we'll go on to shortlist. Bring the finalist teams through pitch prep, mentoring, and then the finalist teams will present their ideas to a panel of judges on May next year during Ecosperity Week. And Temasek is actually giving away 2 pots of $1 million grants to solutions and also investment opportunities as well from our strategic partners. That's a very short plug. Martin, you had a question.
One comment and one question. So on AI, actually a different version might be that a lot of the companies, B2B, actually not adopting AI yet, right? That's been the great sobering factor, but hopefully that changes. But I agree with you, Peter, the potential is there, but that's one of the reasons why it's been slowing down. The other version is who is owning the big AI models and who can invest in it. And it's actually the same big companies that are now driving our current economic model. So there will also be optimization on oil and gas exploitation, and actually already making certain oil and gas exploitation profitable again, because they can predict better what is underneath with AI models. So actually it can also be, or could actually be, quite a dark scenario if those guys are faster in finding. So just AI will not change that. And AI could actually not just using it, but also opening up new ways for using non-renewables. But I agree, there's a lot of potential to disrupt and a lot of. For my question is then, how healthy is really the climate tech ecosystem in Thailand? And Thailand is also quite dominated by corporate VCs, not you guys, but we have a lot of corporate VCs. And some people actually say, indirectly, the corporate VCs using investment in climate tech for greenwashing, because their core business actually is not changing that much, and they're investing, and then they sort of advertisement what they are doing. So don't want to be more provocative than that, but I think, maybe you can comment on the healthy state of the, what are the great companies and in climate tech, and can they actually grow? Can they scale? Are they being allowed to just go up in this oligopoly in energy in other markets? Thank you.
Peter and Warafat first, maybe.
Yeah. So I think the state of climate tech ecosystem in Thailand is very early. There's a lot of, as we already heard, funding gaps in many ways. So in the first way is that, like you mentioned, a lot of capital for innovation in Thailand. I would say it's 70% to 80% corporate venture capital. So that means the stage that they would invest would be, Series A, which they should already have some products. So that leaves a majority of the startup who doesn't have even the minimum viable product to, try to feed for themselves. So that's one problem, initial capital for them to get into the stage and try to make business. Number 2 is that for financing, that startup can't go to banks for financing. That's a big funding requirement for working capital. So when they have some product and they want to work with corporates, right? And corporates said, "Oh, you need to be able to handle this much workload," and they're like, "Oh, I can't because there's no funding, working capital, and they can't go to banks." So innovative funding solutions like Kun Jirapat mentioned, peer-to-peers might work, but the rate is crazy expensive. So that in itself may not make the model that viable. At last, I think, but we are starting to see things changing. The early funding stage, we are seeing a lot of companies, but again, corporate venture capital trying to come up with early stage fundings, or the government sector are trying to launch this early stage funding, but still a long way to go, I would say.
Maybe I can add a bit on that. So I think in Thailand we are quite early, right? And when we say early, I would say not early in terms of age, but early in terms of the number of startups. I think we have been building this sector for a while. I think back in 2018 there was no energy startup in Thailand, and New Energy Nexus started a hackathon. So now two of those hackathon become the champion in the sector, luckily. So they survive until now, and they are now expanding abroad. So I would love to see more of that happening here. But what I see is definitely, one is funding gap. Definitely. Second is there's no new pipeline of startups that's coming out. So we can see like this coming out from the lab. We can see that some SMEs some startup turn into an SME to survive, right? So just wait for the funding. So what I think could help right now, I think, is the visibility of. We should have a platform where we see who is interested in the sector, what milestone have they reached, so that we can scale those use cases with funding, matching that with foreign VC, for example, or additional others funding from philanthropy as well. Actually, interestingly enough, there seem to be philanthropy funding coming in, but not into earlier stage startup yet, I would say. But they are interested in funding earlier stage kind of research, which could be a new source of funding there, definitely. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Europa, and thank you for the questions, Martin. I'm going to take two more from the audience, and I'll just let the speakers answer them, and we've got to wrap up quite shortly after that. Any takers for a question? Okay, well, then at least I have a question here. So, I mean, we talked a little bit about aligning stakeholder needs earlier as well, and we know that creating an enabling environment for climate tech adoption in Thailand requires aligning stakeholder engagement, right, across various sectors, your private sector, government, international partners, also, with CSOs as well. I guess, Peter, I'm going to go to you first. You were talking about adoption rates for renewable energy technology as well. That varies very widely, with a strong correlation between adoption rates and costs as well. So what kind of building blocks are needed to ensure the commercialization and scale of these technologies? And where do you see the need for collaboration more?
Yeah, well, okay, I'm going to answer that question by describing a particular area of climate finance, which is Thailand's Department of Climate Change and Environment, which is just a baby. She just turned 1 year old. So it spun off from Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment. And their job is to keep track of the NDC plan. So what are the actual results for the NDCs that Thailand has set for itself in the areas, in the sectors of energy and transport and ag and industry and waste to energy. Well, I'm working on an ADB team that is working with the Department of Climate Change and Environment and helping them figure out how to attract financing. The problem is that the people in that department don't have a background in finance. So what we're doing is we're trying to work and connect them and the ministries where all this stuff is done, because they're just a Department of Climate Change. All the work is done through the Agriculture Ministry, through the Ministry of Energy, through the Ministry of Transport, et cetera. So the problem is you have this like huge translation problem. Investors are looking for climate tech or clean tech. They don't really care if it's in the action plan, and they may or may not care, what the greenhouse gas emissions reductions are. They just want to know it's commercial, it's innovative, and it will have a positive impact. So there's really a misalignment between investors who are looking for low carbon technologies and the government, say the Thai government, who is trying to promote meeting its targets under the Paris Agreement. Okay, so the amount of funding needed in Thailand over, say, from the period 2030 to 2050, this analysis has been done, I think, by the World Bank and also maybe a couple of other IFIs. You're going to need about $20 billion, okay? So that's from 2030 to 2050. So $7.5 billion for energy, $6 billion for transport. And, I've been doing some work with Sarani, or Sarani's team has been doing some work on this, looking at the investment needed according to their plans. Their plans are missing large areas where there is actually interesting investment, where there is investor interest that contributes to greenhouse gas emissions reductions, but it's not in the plan. So it's a real disconnect, and I think it will take a while because you just start out doing this accounting. Next year is going to be a very important COP because countries are going to have to be revising and updating their plans. But I do think that if there's an alignment between, there's no NDC shopping list. So if I want to invest in stuff in Thailand that contributes to Thailand's climate targets, I have to get a consultant to help me find out where it is, right? There should be an NDC shopping list. These are the 5 or 6 things in the energy sector. These are the 6 or 7 things, because that would help to effectively allocate capital towards the low carbon projects that contribute to Thailand's international commitments. Even though they could be better, even though 2065 is way too long, we could do better.
Thank you so much, Peter, for that. With that, I know that we're running really quite short of time, so I'm going to go to the final question for all of you. And Peter, you might have really just answered that last question. We know that collaboration is a key, when it comes to climate action and scaling climate technologies as well. So from a climate tech perspective, what collaborations across Southeast Asia would you like to see that will scale the right climate tech to the next height? I'm going to start with Jurapat first.
Oh wow, one of the most difficult questions.
All of you will get a chance.
I think for me personally, I think Singapore is an interesting model where the government is pushing as a role model to decarbonize, right? And they put all their NDC targets up there and actually had their own targets to decarbonize the government even faster than their actual NDCs. So this creates transparency and commitment, right? So my question is, can every country in ASEAN, start with that? Because once you have the targets, then you do the e-procurement. When you do the e-procurement, there's demand for these climate tech startups, and there's more policies that give the carrots to the startups that are actually decarbonizing and contributing to the NDCs. So I think Singapore Gulf SG, I think is quite an interesting project that they're doing right there, and they put in funding to back that up. So at least having that transparency of the targets, the policies, prioritizing this key technology that Peter mentioned. I think those could be like the start. The government being the lead in the sector and following that onwards. So hope that could happen in every country throughout ASEAN as a collaborative effort. But yeah, probably we have to start somewhere in different countries as a pilot. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Jurapat and Warpod.
Yeah, I do think there's a big opportunity to collaborate, especially in knowledge sharing, which might seem apparent, but as in this space, we are all still learning together, and we are learning in silo. So why not we learn together and shorten the time to materialize something? For VC, it means sharing deal flow, sharing due diligence note, sharing thesis. For startup, it could mean sharing developing some shared infrastructure together for AI that's core model that people are using to share, and lessen the time to the market. So I would imagine somewhere along the line that open dialogue, open conversation, open collaboration would really help bring us somewhere faster.
Thank you, Warpod. And Peter, maybe just summarize what you said earlier.
Well, I think it's sort of ironic and unfortunate that we spend so much time talking about how to develop technologies faster, how to scale up financing at a more rapid rate, but we don't talk about how we learn as an ecosystem better. And maybe we need sort of ecosystem AI, right? And so my company, Asia Clean Energy Partners, my colleague Kathy, our finance director, is here today. We've set up something. It's a test. We could fail miserably, but we think it's an interesting proposition. It's called the Southeast Asia Corporate Decarbonization Exchange, or CDX. And we set it up as a platform for corporates to learn from each other about how to decarbonize across all sectors, but also for service providers and business partners who provide services like carbon footprinting, off-site PPAs, energy efficiency, renewable energy, nature-based solutions, to come and present and share their solutions with, because this is a very interactive event. This is really good. This is much better than most panels that I go to where you have 4 learned people talking and everybody listening, and you might have one question. This is very interactive. That's good. And you have set this up as UCFS, so you're bundling the learnings. I was really encouraged to hear you're going to take the learnings from this and from the other ones and share them. But the idea is, to create a living platform, and the business model, we're figuring it out. But you have business partners who, pay is sort of like, they're like advertisers in a way, but they provide training. And then you have the members who are companies who can have some of their CSOs and their people who need to learn things join the platform and learn from each other.
Thank you so much, Peter, and thanks for doing a plug for us as well. But with that, on that note, I'm going to just thank Jerapad, Warford, and Peter again for being here today and sharing all your very insightful experiences from your own backgrounds. I'm going to end off here, but I think Shireen, we've got a picture. Yeah, picture.
A quick picture, yes. But yes, thank you again to our panel.